Hi one and all, it's Nicki here. Welcome back to my channel. For those who are new here, I am an author and editor and I post videos about writing, editing, reading, film and TV and all the other things that I adore. Today I'm here to do one of the tags I've been seeing floating around the vlog sphere, shall we call it, and it's called the book stories tag. It's a little bit different than some of the other tags you see because there's not questions. What we have to do is pick out some books, talk about them, and these are books that have influenced us or had some impact on our lives, to which there's some kind of story attached. So I picked 5 for you, and without any further ado, we'll make a start. First of all, we have this one. Now, as you can see, it's looking pretty unhappy. It needs a bit of love. It's literally fallen apart on me, as you can see. Here we go. And it is my best book of rhymes, and it's full of, you know, the usual little stories, Bar Bar, Black Sheep, Three Blind Mice, and this is a book that has been with me since I was a child. And the reason I picked this one is because it probably launched my love of reading and writing, I would say. As a child, I always loved books, and this is one of the earliest ones. My mother used to read to me when I was little. I had trouble sleeping when I was little, so she used to read me stories, and then she would have to sit on the stairs, and before I got to sleep I would call out and make sure she was still there, and gradually she'd work her way down the steps until I was finally asleep. But reading this was something she did for me for a very young age. Part of me would love to get this book rebound at some point, but it's just one of those things that I've got to look into it. I don't know how much it's going to cost, because it is falling apart, and it's been mended with you know, acid sellotape and things over the years. But you can see how well loved it was and how much we read it. And so really hearing books read to me and then reading them with my mother as I got older, that really started my love of books and reading. So I'm going to stick this one, excuse me, ducking out of frame for a minute, on the floor. So moving on, and jumping forward quite a few years now, I wanted to mention Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice. Now, it's not the first vampire book I read, actually those were the Vampire Diaries. So they kind of kick-started my love of vampires, but it was really the Anne Rice Vampire Chronicles series that confirmed it as I got that little bit older. I read the book before I saw the film because my father wouldn't let me watch the film at first because of the rating. I think it had an 18, didn't it, rating, and I think I was a little bit younger. I'm thinking, when did I read this? Maybe about 14 or 15 or so. So, and it absolutely cemented my love of vampires that has never left me since. So that one's quite important to me, as you can see. I mean, most of my books, I tend to read fairly lightly. I'm very careful, I don't bend the spines, and I can read a book and put it back on the shelf and it looks like no one's touched it. But there are a few exceptions, and some of the ones you see today are those exceptions where I've read them so many times that you can't help getting a bit of wear, and that's true of this one. The corners are getting a little bit dog-eared and that there, but yeah, so that's why I picked that one. Next up, in fact, in some ways maybe I should have done this one first. It's pretty earlier in the timescale by 2 or 3 years, but we'll roll with it. We have Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, which I have in a 2-volume set here with absolutely minuscule writing. I mean, you won't be able to see on the video, but it is tiny. And I actually bought this for my mother. The story starts because when I was 12, we went to see Les Miserables for my birthday. A couple of years before we'd seen Joseph, that was my first musical, Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat, and I loved it, so I wanted to do another musical. And my mother had been to see Les Mis with her friend, and so they decided to take me to that one. Having read it, I absolutely fell in love with the show. It's remained one of my favourites ever since, for, you know, over 20 years now. And I bought my mother these books for her birthday, I think the following year that was, because she wanted to read it. But she found the print way too tiny to read, so she ended up giving them to me, and I read them. And the reason I've picked these, as well as Les Mis having kick-started or continued my love of musicals, is having read these ones, I then went on a complete classics binge, and pretty much from 12 up until about 14, I'd say, maybe 15, all I read was classics. all I read was the classics. I didn't touch any other books until I then started to get into the vampire stuff and things in my mid-teens. And Penguins at that point, I don't know, yes you can see them, these ones here, this yellow series. Those were available in the cheap bookstore near us for £5. So I just spent years buying 6, read them, buy another 6, read them. And when I had to go and buy another book in the store that wasn't one of these afterwards, I was looking at the back and it was like £8 for one book. Couldn't believe it. I got so used to getting 5 for £6. But Les Mis was the one that started that, and I then went on and I just read nothing but classics, as I said, for 2 or 3 years. And I adore Les Mis. I don't generally turn down pages in books. This book is the exception. There are turn down pages in these books for some of my favourite scenes, because I do adore it, and I've read it a few times all the way through, but I do sometimes just like to dip into my favourite moments when I've just got a spare 5-10 minutes, and so that's why I did mark these ones up. A complete change of pace now for the 4th book, and this one is Wordsworth translated by John Williams. It's non-fiction, obviously. It may seem like an odd choice, but we have a lovely little note here from John. Now, I should say John was my university lecturer for my BA. He lectured for my poetry course, but he was also my supervisor when I wrote my dissertation on Tolkien. So he and I had a great working relationship for that dissertation. We got on so well, and I've always kept in touch with him. I still keep in touch with him now. We don't talk all the time, but we exchange a couple of emails during the year, and whenever I pop back to England, we catch up. So I was back there just towards the end of last year, and I got to see him. We caught up, we had lunch at the pub together, and that was great. Such a wonderful guy. And after I moved to Australia, we were keeping in touch. When I first got here, sort of 2008, 2009, and he asked me to help him. He was doing this book and he needed to translate some German. So I did a little bit of translation for him, and he sent me a copy of the book. So he's written a really nice little inscription here. Dear Nicola, here at long last is your copy. You're under no obligation to read all this, but if you do, I hope you'll recognise your invaluable contribution along the way. Many thanks, best wishes, John. It's signed and dated for 2010. And this book means a lot to me because John has been a great friend. I'm so glad that we've kept in touch over the years. He was a wonderful influence on me for my dissertation, and even though I wasn't a fan of studying poetry, he made the classes fun, and so getting this really nice copy from him for helping him out is a great memento of our friendship. So I really love that one. And that brings us on to the final book, which I thought I ought to mention because it impacts my writing. Now, before I ever read any original LGBT fiction, I obviously was in the fan fiction kind of stream of things, and I was writing some fanfics, and it was a friend of mine, a fellow author, Julie Lynn Hayes, who said to me, look, I love this guy called Bob Vickery, you should read him. So this is one of 2 books of his short stories that I picked up. This one's called Cockshell, and it's really was my first foray into original LGBT fiction, aside from, you know, a few of the classics. But in terms of contemporary fiction, this was the first one, and so it was that and her influence that kind of got me into, first of all, editing LGBT fiction for other authors, and then eventually coming to write it myself from there. So that's another important one for me because that's kind of part of my writer's story, I guess. So I hope you've had fun. If you love this tag, do a version of it yourself. I'd love to see what books everyone picks and what's influenced you. If you're enjoying my videos, please, please, please subscribe. Click on that little bell so you get notifications. Leave me a comment below. What did you think of my picks? Do you have any, if you're not going to film the vlog, is there any you just want to tell me about in the comments? I look forward to reading them, and I will see you all again next time with another vlog. Bye for now, everyone.